What's up? Welcome back to another video here on Free Will Photos. Today we're actually going to be editing an image that my wife took with one of my cameras while we were on a recent photo trip. I tagged her along to go watch the sunrise, her idea by the way, and she said, hey, give me a camera, I want to try this thing out. So that's what we're going to be editing today, one of her photos, just because I was ingesting them into ON1 and it inspired me to edit, so I want to do that. So let's go ahead and jump into the computer and take a look at what we can do with this photo. All right, so here we are inside of ON1 Photo Raw, and this is the image. And she was inspired by all of the locks on the bridge. Story about my wife, she wanted to go visit the lock bridge in Paris. They have since taken it down. So when she seen these locks, she got really excited and inspired. So she took a good amount of photos of just these locks. Now, I gave her the camera on aperture priority mode with the 17-28, so it's a wide angle lens, and I think she did a good job overall with the composition and the image here. So first thing that I would do though to edit this image is I'm going to hit the letter C to get the crop tool, and I don't want window. What I want is a 4x5 or an 8x10 crop. I just feel like this is it's the Instagram, if you will, aspect ratio. And I think that it works well for this particular image. There's a lot of leading lines in it as well, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But my idea is to put the locks somewhere between the center third and in the center third, and then using the leading lines to kind of fill the negative space in the upper and lower thirds. So what I'm going to do is just pull this in a little bit and reposition the locks. Now, what I'm noticing is based off of how she was holding the camera and the angle that she had towards the actual locks. Now, this is one of those things where it's important to see what you're doing with the camera, or pay attention to what you're doing with the camera when you're capturing your subjects or your images, because when you get it into the editing window, such as ON1 here, you're going to have to do something with that. So what I'm noticing is she was holding the camera a little skewed, and she took the image at an angle. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, right? It's just something that you have to be aware of so you know where you're going to get it right or where you're going to correct it. So what I'm going to do is just rotate this, looking at the grid, and there's a line that's going to go vertical here up against this this vertical pole, and that's what I'm using to kind of eyeball if this is vertically, like straight up and down. Now, ON1 does have a few transform controls to fix perspective and skew and things of that sort, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use those. I think that if I just make this vertical, that's going to make it look good, but we'll find out. Maybe come back to revisit that. And notice I'm not trying to make this item here evenly straight, right? And the reason for that is I know where we were, and my wife and I were standing on something that is even ground to this vertical pole. That's why I was going more vertical, or focusing on the vertical alignment as opposed to the horizontal alignment, because the horizon in this particular image is likely always going to be skewed, or it's going to require more advanced correction than what I'm willing to put in on this image. All that to say, vertical alignment is the best way to go here. Now that I have that aligned, I just got to choose how much negative space do I want above and below. All of the detail and the interesting stuff is really happening here in the center. So if I were to bring this down just a bit, and I'm also trying to get rid of this graffiti, right? And without having to use any form of corrective or distraction removal tools, which, or at least a minimal amount of having to use those. So I think this actually looks pretty good like so. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter to commit that to my computer. Now it's time to activate Brilliance AI just so I can see what's going on here, because I love using Brilliance AI on my images. And what I'm noticing is I have some color over here on the left that I do want to enhance. And then I have the bridge detail back over here. Now, Brilliance AI did a really, really good job, I think, of extracting some of the detail. Now, this is not so important down here, so I'll probably darken that down. And then, of course, we got to get rid of this bub thing up here. It's just distracting and ugly. So let's start with that. And I'm just going to use the regular perfect eraser because I think that that is the tool for the job. So let's just go ahead and paint right over this and let ON1 do its thing. So ON1 did a great job using just the regular perfect eraser. Now there's a little bit of a distraction right down here, and I'm not trying to make this perfect. I'm just trying to take away things that I don't think really need to be there in the photo. And obviously your image is going to require different editing techniques and styles. But for me, that's what I'm going to do for this particular image, just to kind of clean it up and make things look a little bit more presentable. Especially since I'm giving this to my wife so she can have it as a memento of our early morning trip to watch the sunrise. So I removed as many of the distractions as I felt I needed to remove. There could be more in here, but I'm not going to spend forever removing those. However, if I want to see what the picture looks like with distractions and without, if you come over to the layer, there's going to be this little chevron or this right arrow. If you click that, it exposes all of the adjustments or the settings that you've applied to your image so far. And you can see one of those is retouching. And I really like using this because if I uncheck this radial bubble, it's going to put all of those distractions back in my image. And think of this as like turning on or off an effect. So you could do all your work and then say, okay, did I like what happened there? And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back on and turn it off. And you could see what it's doing to the overall image. And I personally enjoy having the distractions removed or the blemishes, however you want to look at that. So now it's time for the fun part, because I think I have a really good canvas. If I look at this is what the original exposure was when it came out of camera. And then this is what ON1 Brilliance AI was able to do for me. I like how it warmed it up because that really does take me back to the sunrise that we were there to witness, which is happening right over in this area. So now what I want to do is come over to local because I think it's time to minimize some of this nonsense down here that just doesn't look so entertaining or interesting. So I'm going to hit add adjustment, hit the letter M on my keyboard. So that way I get my masking bug and it's set to gradient. I'm just going to click right down here and rotate this. So that way I can kind of just minimize the exposure value down below. And I'm okay if it comes up a little bit. And really what I want to do is get it somewhat level with this bottom railing. So I'll rotate that around, and it doesn't have to be perfectly level with it. I just want it somewhat level because what I don't want to do is have this area of the water darker and then this area of the water brighter. And it's like this off balance look. Personal preference, and you know, it is what it is. But then what I'm going to do is just come down here, pull down on the exposure to darken that area up. And then I'm also going to change the color temperature to blue because darker areas, in my opinion, should be a little bit more towards the blue on the color temperature side. They should be a little cooler. It's just my personal preference. Then I'm going to pull down on the structure as well, because I don't really care to have that area in focus. And in fact, I may even throw a lens blur on here later. I don't want to jump too far ahead into the effects. I just want to kind of get my tone and colors the way that I want them. So now that I have that adjustment made for the bottom portion, I'm going to leave my sky alone, because I don't think that there's anything I really need to do with the sky and local adjustments. However, I do want to work with this area right here, and then maybe do something with the light that's happening in the background here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the light in the background. I like to work my way up. And one of the best ways to kind of work with dimension or depth in an image is using the new depth mask. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click on the adjustment layer here, or the mask, I should say, and then apply a depth mask. And you can do that by right clicking and then clicking create depth mask. Hit the letter O so I can see it. And right now I'm actually selecting the foreground. So I'm going to invert this mask. So I'm selecting the background, or the things that are perceived to be a little bit further away. And I want to really modify this mask, because I don't want any of these lighting adjustments to happen on the foreground elements. So I'm just going to pull this back quite a bit and hit the letter O. And you can see I'm making everything dark back here. I got to paint in some of this adjustment right here, because it is not picking up that little area, which is fine, because this is more so in the foreground, and ON1 may not be able to tell that that is part of the background. And what I want to do is really work on brightening this area up. So I'm going to pull the exposure up, probably 1.5, and I'm going to work with the mids, because I do want that area to be a little bit brighter. And you'll see why here in a little bit. Sometimes you want to darken your backgrounds. I think in my mind, at least where I'm going with it, I want to soften the background, but make it brighter. So I'm pulling the structure down now. And then I wonder if there's any benefit to moving the haze slider. And if I pull it to the left, it doesn't look too terrible. Okay, so I'm losing some information over there in the highlights in the background. So what I want to do is maybe pull my whites back, and I'll pull down on my highlights, see if I can recover. Oh no, got to pull those pretty far if I want to recover. So I'll just use a brush to modify those here in a little bit. All right, now we will push the color temperature just a touch. I think that works. And then I'll saturate it just a little bit. And you can see how I'm starting to get that glow under the bridge here. And I'm really actually enjoying that. Now what I want to do is, one, correct the highlight exposure issue. So we'll go ahead and pull down on the highlights here. I'll take my brush, holding the J key down. I'm just going to brush over those areas. So that way I've corrected that now. And that is what it is. If I hold the J key, we'll pull it just to about there. I think that's good to go. Now I can start working on my foreground area, and that's the locks here in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Adjust. We'll expose, midtones, shadows. So I'm going to paint in right over the locks, and that just brings a little bit more attention and interest to the locks. And that's where I want to go. Now, I guess it would be worth noting, I do have a very low flow. It's set to 23 on the brush. I didn't note that earlier. So if you get a different result than what I'm getting, if you're like trying this out on your own images or whatever, and you're like, hey, why is it gradually growing into the image for Chris, but not so much for me? Well, it's because I have my flow set to a lower value. So if I turn this off and turn it on, you can see what's happening with the locks. And that by itself is not very interesting overall, but it's going to help when we start working with some of the effects in the background. So right now, or I'm sorry, in the overall image, not just the background. So let's go ahead and turn this effect off and turn it back on. And you can see it's not the best paint job. And I don't think that that matters as much. It's just something that, you should be aware of. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to jump into effects because I think I have all of the tonal values the way that I want. So this is the before straight out of camera, and this is the after, or what we've already edited. And so I'm going to come over here to effects and hit add. And the very first thing I want to do is start working with that background. I really enjoy working with backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead and hit blur. And what I meant to do is come over here and copy the mask that we applied to the background. I want to apply that to the foreground. So I need to actually activate the mask and then right click on it, hit copy. And now we can come to effects, hit this mask and go ahead and hit paste. So now it's applied to the background there. It doesn't look the greatest, but we'll work that out. And I'll pull down on my Gaussian blur. Okay, so I think that will do overall. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit my masking bug, and we're going to fade this into the background. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and click right about here, and I'll rotate it. And this is part of building those compound masks. So what you can see is this allows me to fade this particular effect into the image overall. So with this, it's mostly in the sky, and then it's fading further down into the image. And you can see the effect of that as it is applied here. So now let me just turn this off and on. Turn it off. And it's a very subtle effect. It should be coming through on YouTube, and for the sake of that, I will increase it just a bit. And what I'm trying to do is just make it a little bit more hazy back there. Now what I'm going to do is hit add filter. We are going to put, we're going to try something that I don't really know if it's going to work. I'm going to look for a LUT that is just going to enhance the background here. Now, I enjoy using the color grading LUTs. So we'll just go through and see if there's a LUT that speaks to this. And I actually like what's happening with this classic look. And I'm looking for something that's going to just really make those colors in the background look a little bit more vibrant. So bear with me as I look through. Okay, so I think I found the LUT that I would want to apply to this particular image. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on the mask, hit the letter M to get my masking bug, and we're going to grab, I want to protect the edges. So I'm going to click on center. And why did that not give me what I was expecting? I want edges. Sorry. Okay. We'll rotate this, and I'm just going to pull this in because I only want it in the background bridge area. So we'll do something like that. And we'll make it a little bit smaller. but we'll make it more narrow, and then I'll fade that color just a bit. So maybe something like that. Okay, so obviously this doesn't look the greatest. Well, this is where masking comes in. We'll just go ahead and get the brush tool now, and I am going to paint this away from the center bar area here and only leave it in the background. And you'll see what that does. So now I have that added. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, it's just giving a little bit more interest back there, but it is a little too strong. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back on the overall opacity, because we don't need that to be like crazy strong, right? Just strong enough. And this is actually one of the fun things about working in ON1 and masks and things of that sort. So if you have a really nice background and then the foreground is like barely touched, it does help with the overall look in the image. And that's the reason why I'm doing this. So we'll leave that one there. And now let's see if we could do something about the sky and then maybe even the water. So let's look for another LUT. And this time I want something that is going to be a little bit more, I guess, engaging for the sky, adding some more depth and color. And I think that comfort is the one. And although keen also looks pretty good, let's go with keen. Okay, so now I just need to do the opposite effect that I did earlier. So the way that I would do this is I would go ahead and I'd probably use a reflected gradient. I think that that would be the best. So let's hit the letter M. Let's go with reflected gradient. Hit the or click, hit the letter O. Yeah, all right. And then we'll just rotate this around, maybe somewhere around there. I think that'll be fine. Maybe pull it up a little bit higher. And we'll pull this down a little bit further into the overall image. Let's turn this off and turn it on. And I actually like what it's doing over the entire image. So I may not even mask this any further. You know, like, because I mean, this is what we started with. And here is where we've gotten so far. And, you know, this is just me playing around inside of ON1, figuring out what I can do. And maybe I'll saturate this one a little bit more. Yeah, you see how that's pulling out some more color in the sky, and it's just making this nice warm glow down here at the bottom of the bridge and also on this pole right here. Yeah, I think that that actually complements the overall shot well. So I think we'll go with that. All right. So I think the last thing that I would do to this particular image is I would probably add in some dynamic contrast over the locks because they are in pretty much soft focus, and the contrast around them probably should be pulled up a little bit. And that's kind of a quick and dirty trick to increase the perceived sharpness in an image. So I'm just going to use the default values, grab my brush tool, and let me invert my mask so that way I can paint this in. And I'm going to actually change my flow up to 100 for this one. I'm just going to paint right over these locks. And I know that the locks were supposed to be the focal point, but I also wanted to complement or have the background as a focal point as well, or a complementing element, co-star, if you will. So main subject are the locks, but the background is also very, very interesting to me or significant. So I wanted to highlight that as well, which is why I put the color into those areas. Let's see if I can modify this blur just a bit more. Maybe just a little bit. And that just helps with bringing out some of that dreamy aspect, but I'm losing detail in the clouds. I could take my brush. So let's go brush, go with the flow. We'll say about, or you know what? We'll go with opacity instead of flow. And the difference between opacity and flow is opacity, with one click, it will erase evenly in the brush area the same amount. And in order to continue to build on top of that, you have to let go of the click and then keep clicking to build it up to 100%. Whereas flow, the more you brush in an area, it just gradually builds up. Think of it like a Crayola. Like if you make one swipe with the crayon, it's going to put a little bit of color down on the paper. But if you color back and forth in one area, you're going to put a lot more of the color or of that crayon in that area. So hopefully that made sense. All right. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn my opacity, or I'm sorry, make my brush size about the same size as the sky area here. And what I'm trying to do is just minimize the opacity or the effect of what's happening in the sky, because I don't want to lose that much detail in the sky. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint, Shift X. So that way I can have my erase tool, and then I'll make it a little bit larger and I'll paint right over like so. And that should help with the reduction of the clouds getting impacted by that blur. And I don't need to do a whole lot. Starting to get some fringing around the edge here. So let me go ahead and we'll go Command R and I'll paint right over the edge here. And that should help reduce some of that. Doesn't have to be perfect. So I think that'll be good. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay, so here's the before and here is the after. Took a little while for me to get to this point, but if I, wasn't actually talking through everything, probably would have gotten here a little bit faster. So hopefully you found some value in the content. If you did, smash the like button. If you're new here, consider subscribing. My name's Chris. I create content centered around ON1 Photo Raw, teaching people how to do creative things just like this. If that's something you're interested in, then you definitely want to hit the subscribe button so you can stick around and see more content to come. Now, if you are looking to save some money with ON1 Photo Raw, consider using my coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. It is an affiliate code. I do make a small commission off of every purchase made with that code, but that's at no extra cost to you. And it's a great way for you to support this channel and what I do here. Now, if you want to learn more about ON1 Photo Raw, consider going over to my website and signing up for a one-on-one coaching call where I walk you through a customized workflow that is specific for your photographic editing needs inside of ON1 Photo Raw. So that is a great way for you to learn the software and get one-on-one training. With that being said, if you want to watch more videos about learning how to edit inside of ON1, go ahead and click the playlist on the screen now. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.